Hello, and welcome to our second attempt at doing a Sunday message, which I hope will air on Sunday morning, Palm Sunday. Right now it is Saturday morning, and we are still having all kinds of technical learning to do, and we are using actually a very small laptop to get this message out, and we're really shooting in the dark here, trying to get this done right. But I have on order a webcam, and hopefully when I get that, I'll be able to use a more powerful computer, and maybe we'll be able to do this a little better, and you won't have to look at the talking head so much. But anyway, here we are again, and we are in this coronavirus environment. And it's not exactly pleasant for any of us. We're going through new stuff all the time. We haven't figured out exactly where we're going to come out at the end of this. If it gets good, our life's still going to change. But last week I talked about the timeout that God is giving us, and we're still there. We're still there, of course. And basically, I spoke about the fact that he's giving us a timeout. And now this week, I'd like to speak about maybe how we can best manage it. And basically, one of the major problems that we have in managing our lives or anything, and especially when we're forced to change our lives in the way we've had to change it, is managing our emotions. Our emotions were given to us by God. It's one of the 5 parts of the soul, and it's important for us to be able to use our emotions correctly. And most of us have a problem in doing that all the time. And basically, I guess that the important thing about the emotions are that they should never be the boss of our soul. Our mind needs to be the boss of our souls. And so this week I'm going to speak to the key to managing the timeout that God has placed us in. And the key to that is to know ourselves. We have to know ourselves. And how do we do that best? We do that best by knowing who created us. The ancient playwright, the Greek playwright Aeschylus, he used the maxim in his play called Know Thyself. And he wrote this famous play called Prometheus Bound. And in this play, the main character, Prometheus, he expresses his anger at the Olympian gods and against what he believes to be the injustice of his having been bound to a cliffside by Zeus, who is the king of the Olympian gods. And then one of his peers comes to him. His peer's name is Oceanus, and he comes to reason with Prometheus, and he cautions him that he should know thyself. And what he's saying in this context is he's telling Prometheus that he should know better than to speak ill of the one who has his life in his hands. Do you know him? Do you know the one who has his life in his hands, your life in his hands? Do you know yourself? You need to figure it out. And the way we get to know ourselves is by knowing the one who created us. Most of us think, all right, I'm here to be happy. I'm here to figure out how I can make me and my loved ones happy. And that's really counterproductive, because it's in the counter order that God has for us. Our order is to know his plan for us and his purpose for us and do what God wants us to do. And in that process, he will make us happier and give us joy in a greater way than we could ever manufacture for ourselves without skipping the God-knowing step, which the world is really good at and is being deceived into doing on a mass basis. On Palm Sunday, Jesus marched from the Mount of Olives down into the Kidron Valley, and then he went up to the great synagogue. The crowds greeted him with shouts of Hosanna, or in the Hebrew, Hoshiana, which is a combination of two Hebrew words, Hoshia, which means save us, and Na, which means we beseech you, or please, save us, please. That's what the crowds were yelling to Jesus. And it was a time of great joy for Jesus, despite the fact that he knew that he'd be hanging crucified on a cross less than a week later. How could he do that? How could he do that? He could do that because he knew himself and he knew his Father. You and I are no different. The key to navigating life's hardships is to know our God, because if we know our God, we will know our purpose and we will know who we are. What was it that Mark Twain said, that famous saying? He said the two most important days in a person's life, excuse me, are the day that they're born and the day that they find out why. And that's a critical thing. And most of the people in the world have not thought, why am I here? They just think, I got to go try to be happy. I got to use my time to try to figure out how to make things good for me. And they don't think that, hey, maybe I should get on God's wavelength and he'll make things good for me. That's not the way we're wired, but that's God's intent for us. So God has allowed us to come into our new corona-driven life. Why? So that people will be driven off balance and out of their entrenched quagmires in the hopes that their spiritual switches will be turned on and they will see fit to seek him. That's what we're supposed to do. If we don't do that, then what do? We're going to feed on the fear of the moment, and there's plenty of fear on the moment out there. Just keep watching your TV for 8 hours a day or 4 hours a day, and there's plenty of fear. There's information that's good for us, so we should tune into that. But the fear that is being thrown at us, we need to not feed on that, because if we do, what will we end up knowing? We're going to end up knowing fear, and we're going to not know God or ourselves, which is our primary fix for this corona life that we're in. Well, trying to navigate in a new world can be very stressful, and we're all finding that out. And that's what we're all going through. When Heidi and I moved to Hungary, we had to undergo something known as culture shock. Coming from America, we knew how to navigate the basics of life without even thinking. And now we had to learn an entirely new way to do almost everything. Renting, paying bills, collecting necessary food basics, figuring out multiple methods of transportation, overcoming a language barrier, figuring out how to remain safe, and so on and so forth. It actually took us probably a solid 8 months before any sense of normalcy took over. Just to give you an example of how it could be difficult, paying bills was a great change in our life. Just paying your electric bill, your rent, your internet bill, your heating, everything you had to pay. You didn't get to write a check or send something in or email it in through using a credit card. We were all of Hungary is forced to stand on a long line at the post office and pay their bills once a month. Can you imagine? And I'm not kidding you about this, but I literally read the book War and Peace, standing on line waiting to pay my bills in Hungary, in Budapest. So that was culture shock. What we're going through now is probably something quite similar in a different way, though. Now the world's looking for what's called the new normal, and we're all in uncharted waters looking to land somewhere safe and sound for our bodies as well as our emotions. The great danger that we face in these uncertain times is the danger of letting our emotions dictate our actions. Because emotions don't have the prerequisites for the job of dealing with rapidly changing circumstances. That's the function of our minds. In Mark chapter 12, verses 29 and 30, a scribe comes to Jesus and he asks this question. He said, "Which is the first commandment of all?" And Jesus answered him and said, "The first of all the commandments is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment.'" Those are the words of Jesus. He specified with all your mind. Watchman Nee said this: "Man's mind is a battlefield." And what did he mean by that? He understood that the ground that Satan is fighting for in you is your mind. Once a person allows his or her emotions to rule their soul, Satan no longer needs to waste any time with you. Why? Because he's already won. Because emotions cannot discern truth. Emotions have no ability to discern the plan, the purpose, or the presence of God. Listen, God will not give you a new mind. He will offer you a new spirit in Ezekiel 36:26. He will also offer you the opportunity to renew your mind in Romans 12:2. And we would be very wise to take both of those opportunities. But he won't give you a new mind. And that's fine, because what he's given you is plenty good. It falls upon us to choose to direct our minds to accept God's new spirit and allow our minds to be renewed. And we can do this because our minds were wired to realize that when we're off, we need to make an adjustment to God's grace. Our emotions cannot do this. Why can our emotions not adjust to God's grace? Because emotions can't think. The mind thinks and the emotions feel. The emotions have three functions: responding, appreciating, and indicating. What do the emotions respond to? Well, they respond to the circumstances of a person's life. You may have a great victory, and or you may get a raise or a promotion, or you may see your child have a great victory in a sports contest, or maybe on something they're trying to do in school, and it'll make you feel great. Or you may suffer a loss of some sort, or have financial problems, or be rejected, or have health problems. All kinds of things in a person's life that are circumstances that emotions just react to or respond to. How do we, for instance, respond to gossip? Well, emotions can take us to a very wrong place in responding to gossip. Think about the last time you heard an accusation being made in the media. What was your first reaction? Just hearing the words in the atmosphere probably impressed your emotions to consider it as truth rather than falsehood. Publishing an accusation, whether it's true or not, carries the power of an indictment even before it can be examined for truth's sake. And that's a problem. And so what we need to do and to train ourselves is to let our mind be the boss and our emotions be secondary. We need to respond with our mind before we react with our emotions. What's another circumstance that can be that our emotions deal with? Some people, if they engage or feed upon pornography, a person's emotions can respond to it as lust. And then as it becomes fed upon more and more as a habit, it can scar a person's soul. And there's an example of this in the Bible in 2 Samuel chapter 13. David's oldest son, Amnon, who was the presumptive successor of King David, he lusted after his half-sister Tamar, and he ended up luring her to his room, and he raped her. And it's interesting because as you read the passage, the Bible states that he says he loved her. In his emotion, in his lust, he made the statement that he loved her, or at least he thought he loved her for real. But then 2 Samuel 13:15 says this, after it was all over and he had raped his half-sister, says, then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, arise and be gone, get out of here. So that's how emotions can take over a situation where the mind needs to be there, where the mind needs to be in control, so that one can be averted from doing a crime of passion. So that's responding is one thing that the emotions do. What else can the emotions do? And the emotions are good. God gave us emotions to appreciate things, and that's appreciating is the second thing that emotions do. In a marriage, hopefully the decision of love was made by the mind, but when it is run by your mind and it is, you bring it by God, joy was instituted by God for us to appreciate the situation that we have entered, if it is approved. And we have joy with our spouse, we have joy with our kids, with our friends and our loved ones and our relatives. In praise and worship, God wants us to enjoy him. How many times have we really gotten an emotional response in the midst of worship and we wonder, wow, where did that come from? That came from God responding to us, responding with our emotions correctly to him, adjusting to our love for him. Food may be a physical necessity for us, and it may be necessary for us to eat nutritious food. But thank the Lord that it's enjoyable too. I can emotionally be taken away by food by chocolate and candy, just like a child, and rather than go nutritiously. But food is something that can also be enjoyed. And in Luke chapter 1, verse 44, we read of a special enjoyment. And this was when the Virgin Mary, who was pregnant with the baby Jesus, went to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who was pregnant with the baby John the Baptist. And what did Elizabeth say in Luke 1:44? She said, as soon as the voice of your salutation, speaking to Mary, sounded in my ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. So there was the baby in the womb, and I stress the baby in the womb, John the Baptist, leaping for joy because he had an emotional response to the mother of his Lord, and his Lord being in the womb of Mary. So responding, appreciating, and indicating is the final thing that we find emotions able to do. Emotions are signposts. Now, emotions should never, as we said before, it should never be the primary decision maker in anything that we are set out to do, because they can't be trusted. They can't think. So a marriage decision must never be based on a big emotional falling in love, apart from our own minds and God's wisdom weighing in on it. That said, emotions are an indicator of something that's either right or wrong. Emotions can show something going wrong in a person. How is that? When we see a person might have a lack of compassion, or maybe they have an excessive amount of worry or anxiety in their life, and what we're going through now in Coronaville, is just that. A lot of worry and anxiety is being propagated out there. That can indicate that a person has a heart problem and may not be walking in God's love or walking in with God enough. Now, behavior can hide it, but emotions can't. In Luke chapter 15, we read about the story of the prodigal son. And the prodigal son came home, and the father was so joyful that his son came home because he loved him, despite the fact that the son had gone and squandered what the father had given him. And when the young son came back and everybody was celebrating, the older son was angry. He was very angry at this whole thing because he thought it was a put down of himself, because he was, in his mind, the good son, the son that did what the father wanted and obeyed the father. And now the father was having a party for the younger son who had squandered the wealth he had been given and had been a bad guy. Well, this anger exposed his heart. And it said in Luke 15:28, the older son was angry and he would not go in to the party. Therefore, the father came out and entreated him. And so it can be a signpost, seeing how a person's emotions play out. We can see whether a person has some problems that need to be dealt with or not, or if they have a problem with God or not. In this coronavirus climate, fear is the predominant emotion. We need to overcome it, and we need to help others overcome it too. If we feed our minds with truth, our emotions will respond to truth. If we fill our minds with lies, our emotions will respond to lies. Why is that? It's because emotions do not have the ability to analyze what they receive, nor can they discern between what is of God or what is not of God. That's what our minds do. So it's critically important not to let our emotions and our movements and our lives be controlled by our emotions. So it's like a person who navigates life through their emotions is like someone who is running blindfolded trying to get somewhere. They're going to get hurt. Therefore, the news that we watch on our electronic media, on TV, and the nonstop worst-case scenarios that we see, they cannot help but play on our negative emotions as long as we feed on it. I thought this week when I saw that Fulton County, I believe Fulton County now has 6 cases of COVID virus in it. But for a long time we only had 1 case, and then on Wednesday we had the 2nd case. And I was thinking, how is the media going to report it? Well, they're not going to just say we have 1 more case. They're going to say something like, the number of COVID cases has doubled in Fulton County. That's the way the media has their own way of telling the truth and exaggerating it. But you and I need to walk in the Spirit if we're going to avoid all the pitfalls of the flesh and the pitfalls that we're being deluged with. We need to stay informed. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying turn the media off, but we don't need to feed on one dreadful report after another. We need to transcend the world, especially when the world is leaning out of control as it is now. Now is the time to take our positions and station ourselves closer to our Creator. We need to walk in the Spirit. Romans chapter 8 verse 5 says, they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit mind the things of the Spirit. This is a time for us to shine and to broadcast the gospel. Why? Because the whole world has death on their mind. Because the whole world is responding to current circumstances with fear. Unworried people are getting worried. Unanxious people are suffering anxiety. Peaceful people are suffering unrest. faithful people are feeling fear. This is not a time to fall apart, especially us Christians. This is a time to build the kingdom for this short span of time where God has the world's attention. I spoke to because my job is working with taxes and the IRS. I spoke to an IRS agent this week, and I said, you need to help us out here. We can't respond to you in the normal way with letters because of the stay-at-home orders that we have been doing. And he got stressed. He was very stressed himself. He said, it's hard on us too. We have to work from home and we can't do things well. And it's we get anxiety too. And I said, yeah, I get it. We're all in the same boat. So what we need to do is help each other. I'll help you, you help me. If you can try to figure out a way where I can fax things, it would help. And we had this little discussion, and I thought, wow, I never heard an IRS agent so emotionally stressed before. I actually felt sorry for the guy. Moving on, talking about emotion still. The Old Testament uses certain words to indicate emotional activity. And this figure of speech is called a metonym. A metonym is a word used as a substitute for an attribute that one is trying to describe. For instance, you may see a business executive and you call him a suit. You may want to express going to see horse racing by saying, "I'm going to the track." The famous saying, "The pen is mightier than the sword," uses two metonyms. What you're saying is the pen, or the written word, is mightier than the sword or violence. So you're using one word to say an attribute of another. And the Bible uses metonyms for emotions, and there are about 4 separate words. They use the word bowels, reins, and kidneys. That's in the Old Testament, and womb in the New Testament. So the Old Testament word for kidneys is kilia, and kidneys were an important part of the sacrifice, and they are meant to be given to God along with the fat of the sacrifice. And this shows that God is interested in our emotions, and that these emotions are to be adjusted to Him and dedicated to Him. That's how our emotions should be in good order. And kilia, which is literally kidneys, it refers to emotions, and when it's referring to emotions, it is often translated in the Bible as reins, R-E-I-N-S, as in taking the reins. And we can see this in Job. Here's an example: Job 19, verses 25 through 27. I should say that verse 25 of chapter 19 of Job is my favorite verse in the Old Testament. And it starts like this: "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another, though my reins be consumed within me." What is Job saying? He's saying, I may be an emotional wreck, but I know my God. Horrible things may have taken place in the circumstances and situations of my life, but I know my God. I know His heart for me, and I will be with Him. And here's another famous verse that has the same thing. Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 9 and 10. "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. What is the Lord saying through Jeremiah? He's saying the heart, which is your soul, or the inner man or inner woman, consists of 5 parts: your mind, your emotions, your will, your conscience, and your self-consciousness. But your heart is deceitful above all things. Why is that? It's because most people fall prey to letting their emotions be the primary engine of their souls. And then he says, so who can know it? Well, God. God tries the reins, and he searches the heart of every person. Only God can do this, because he can search you and me. So he reaches in and he takes the reins. The word for reins there is literally kidneys. He takes our kidneys. He examines our inner kidneys for the purpose of determining our emotions. Are our emotions in control of our souls, or are our minds in control of our souls? Hopefully, your mind is in control and submitted to him. Then you're in proper control. Listen, God created your emotions. He loves to see you use them and to respond to the truth. And the way we are to respond to truth is in spirit and truth. That's how we are to worship him in John 4:24. Discerning truth is accomplished by your mind. When that happens, your rightly related emotions need to follow suit. And that's the necessary order of things in God's behavioral economy. Are you a Christian? This is your time to shine. We have never seen or could ever expect what life would be like in a pandemic. This is a first for all of us. But please know this: you were made for this season. You were made for this moment. And please take this faith to the bank. God has got your back, your front, your top, your bottom, and your side. You were made to go through whatever this corona season has for you and come out victorious. This is for you. This is our time to shine. You can do this. Be aware of your emotions. Use your mind. Don't let fear overtake you. Don't feed on the things of fear. Or don't let the worst case scenarios come into your sphere. Just recognize that whatever you're going through, God is with you. God loves you. God is for you. And you can do this. You can help yourself, and you can help others. Well, God bless you all. Hope this comes out okay. Have a great Palm Sunday, and go to Jesus. Let's have a prayer. Lord, in Jesus' precious name, I just hope that you will come to all of our folks, all of the people in our church, and give them strength and peace and rest and joy and love and creativity in going through this timeout that you put us in, that the world is not finding their place in. Help us to find our place as Christians so we can serve you and know you and love you and worship you. We pray this in Jesus' precious name. Have a great morning. Love you all. Bye for now.